I'm Kate.
I'm Abon.
And I'm Sonia.
And today we're dishing with you from Bambouleh, located at 5525 Wisconsin Avenue. This Mediterranean spot has me wanting to be outside right now.
I know, it's close. We can
spring.
soon have paella outside.
I want to go jump in a lake.
Really?
Oh, not really. I don't swim. That's random.
Okay, but it's the shellfish
the mollusks
talking.
were, yeah.
Well, our guest today is here with us, not in a lake. She is Erica Perl. She is the author of Vintage Veronica. It's a young adult novel. So you're my first young adult novel here at the District Dish.
I'm honored.
Now, I loved reading from very early on, and I loved all the young adult novels and the who am I thinking of? The famous ones, the Fudge, Judy Bloom, and everybody.
Yeah.
What is that? Who you try and emulate? Is that the sort of way you want to get into young readers?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to write classic books that really spoke to kids of all ages, but particularly to teens in that way.
And speaking about classic, it's about vintage stuff.
Yeah,
so
it's classic on two levels.
But you started out as a children's book author,
That's
yes?
right, yeah.
So how did you, what are some of your children's book titles?
My most well-known, the book title that the kids love to yell out is Chicken Butt.
Oh,
That's the title they call for by name, but I've written three other picture books, and then Vintage Veronica is my first young adult novel.
So how'd you make the transition between picture book to chapter book?
You know, I've always wanted to write for all different ages of kids. I've always loved sort of connecting with my reader at different levels, and so this is a book that I've actually been working on for a very long time. So even as the picture books came out, I was still sort of toiling away on my novel and continuing to work on that. And it's just a voice that sort of has been in my head for a long time.
What else did the voice say?
Veronica's voice has just always kind of had my ear, because it's sort of both connected with my own experiences as a teen and also with kids that I would see around me, both my students when I was teaching creative writing and kids that I would just see on the street and be like, that's Veronica right there.
So you started out with creative writing as a teacher, and then from there you transcended into writing picture books and then to chapter
Yeah, I've
books.
always written. I really have always. I've done other things along the way. I actually practiced law for a while, which is, I know,
Why?
kind of hard to believe here.
Telling stories, it's the same thing.
It actually
We do
is.
hear that a
It's
lot
sort
here
of
in
funny.
Fiction.
I was going to say, you get a couple of lawyers here in D.C., but you know, it really is kind of the same thing when people say, "Wow, you were." I was actually a public defender. People say you were a public defender, and then you were a children's author. Where's the connection?
I
and it
can
really
see that,
is.
though.
It's narrative. I
that.
love telling people stories, whether it was my client's story or a story that came out of my head.
Well, since you taught creative writing, I have this idea in my head of a book that I would like to write that's sort of based on family experience, my own personal experience. How does one sort of turn that narrative in their head into finding the voice of a character, creating a book that ends up with something that I can go, oh look, that's my picture there in the back?
You know, every story starts in the same place. It's all an idea, and it's all just kind of out there until you write it down. And so I always, I do it myself, and I always tell kids that when I go into classrooms, I always say, you got to carry a notebook, and you got to just write everything down. And the most important thing is you can't sit on your own shoulder and say, that's a bad idea, that's not funny, that's not good. You've got to just write it down and then figure out later if you can do anything with it. And sometimes it doesn't come to you fully formed. Sometimes you'll get it, someone will say something and it'll strike you a certain way and you'll write down that quote. Or sometimes you'll see something someone's wearing on the metro and you'll write it down. And then later on you can sort of weave them together and see where the story is.
And so that's how you wrote this book as well?
In large part, yeah.
So what was the process in writing? I mean, specifically the process.
The process with this book, I have to say that this book is set in a vintage clothing store, and there was a specific store that I researched the book in largely.
Ooh, is it in D.C.?
It's not in D.C., I'm sorry.
Okay.
I used to live in Massachusetts, and so I started the book there and did most of the research there. In a funny way, it was sort of good that I moved here because I actually branched out into other stores, and so it isn't entirely that one store. But it gave me a good kind of home base for it. And I just would spend a lot of time there, get to know the people there, take notes, take photographs, draw sketches. And that also kind of went into the book because the character of Veronica carries a sketchbook with her. And so each chapter has a little drawing that she's done that kind of brings the character, kind of rounds her out a little bit.
Well, let's talk about vintage shopping just for a minute, because you did find this in this.
It was also great. Writing the book was a great excuse because I was like, oh, it's research. I just have to get this because it's research.
Well, vintage is making a huge comeback. Can I say that? Vintage has always kind of been popular, but I would say that a lot of people are shopping in vintage stores these days. So the young people that are reading your book are probably going to feel connected to it because they are shopping in vintage stores also.
I'm so thrilled about it because for a while it was so trendy, all these books that were all about like the latest bendy this, the latest bendy that, whatever. And so many kids, that's not their experience. Like they're picking up pieces here and there and they're putting it all together, and good for them. So I wanted to really connect with kids who were going out and finding great stuff and making it their own, and say to them, like, hey, you can do it. This is what it's all about.
Veronica did
So
it.
Veronica did it, and so can you. Because a lot of in the book, she's not only picking up items that she likes, but she's also sort of cutting them, sewing them, making them her own. And so that's half the fun.
Do the clothes also tell the story in this book?
They really do, because the clothing store is sort of a character in the book, and so the clothing, each chapter has sort of a different piece of clothing that comes into her life and kind of becomes part of the story.
Who's the target age group for this book?
The book is written for 12 and up, but I myself read a lot of young adult novels, so
I do too.
I emphasize the and up part of it. And I've been hearing the other nice thing I was going to say is I've been hearing nice things about the book having good messages both for parents and for kids, because there's sort of, Veronica gets into a situation with some older kind of mean girls who start pressuring her to kind of do things that they want her to do. And so there's a sort of a stance against bullying that comes through in the book.
Great.
So I wanted it to sort of speak to a very wide range of readers.
So how did the bullying example, did I come from not personal as in you, but someone you knew or someone you encountered with that went through something similar?
What it was as I was writing the book, I started writing about I started writing about the idea that Veronica had gotten attached to an article of clothing and then someone else had taken it. And then from there, it sort of drew me into this whole idea of the conflict there. Like, what would happen then? And would it just be between Veronica and how would you heighten the conflict? And then it just sort of, I wouldn't say it wrote itself, but it just sort of the idea of having other people kind of putting the pressure on her to, what are you going to do about this situation? Are you going to call this person out? What are you going to do? And so the peer pressure in the story kind of grew from there.
I'm just enamored with the evolution. The evolution of an idea from one sentence or two sentences in a quote to a book with a very nice cover.
And certainly a lot of lessons
cover.
for Veronica and for the youth in D.C. But if Veronica was a youth in D.C., where would she be shopping?
Where would she shop? It's a good question. There are so many places that I love. In D.C. proper, there's a great place kind of in the U Street area called Junction that I really like. I love the Georgetown Flea Market, which for a while was not in Georgetown, and I'm happy to report that it's back, which is very nice. Great clothes and also great just knickknacks and stuff. Miss Pixie's is another place that has some clothing, but just fabulous stuff, like little chandelier baubles and all sorts of cool things that you can play with. I like some places outside of the city. There's Polly Sue's in Tacoma Park and Mustard Seed, which is actually just up the street from where we're sitting now.
That's right. Yeah. Lots of places.
Lots of places. You got to get out and explore.
That's
very
right.
much so.
Well,
it's like going green.
And
that is true too. It's nice to have
recycling.
Exactly, it is recycling.
That's right. Well, Erica, thank you so much for being with us. We are looking forward to reading the book. We hope you are too. And don't go away. Come back next time. See who we're dishing with right here on the District Dish.